Linux Presentation Day. It goes back to a community event called Linux Day that has been up and running in Germany for the last 10 years. But because of various circumstances, it shut down in 2013, if I'm not completely mistaken. So the Berlin LUG, as a Linux user group, decided to do something in place of the original Linux Day and created something called the Linux Presentation Day. It's in contrast to the Linux Day, which was only taking place in Berlin for I think with one or two exceptions. The Linux Presentation Day is a pan-German speaking country event. Well, at least that it's set out that way when it was first created last year. But this year, as a matter of fact, as you can see from the map, we are looking at a pan-European event, which has its own set of challenges. Thank you, Aaron. So essentially what we're looking at, starting from the UK right up to Poland and also Greece, for some reason Italy and Spain that have two countries which have just, well, actually Italy is on there, but Spain has just, I think, confirmed, at least for a couple of cities, their participation. The way it works is a true community event. That means each and every location, as in city, is doing their, in inverted commas, own thing. So more often than not, you would have a Linux user group organizing this particular instance of the Linux Presentation Day, where we strive to do it on one day. Each and every LUG is essentially responsible for doing their own logistics, their own marketing, their own PR, but also have then the freedom to stick to a date of their choosing. So as a matter of fact, and I'm going to go into the details in a minute, the LUG in Frankfurt, where I am part of, or which I'm part of, decided to do its Linux Presentation Day on the 3rd of October already, meaning it took place on Monday last week. The reason for this being a media cooperation with one of the biggest broadcasters in Germany, as in public broadcasters, a station by the name of WDR, which stands for Western German Broadcasting Station. The main reason is that we decided to divert a little bit from the original format. The way we did it last year was essentially one day for Linux newbies, i.e. people who don't have a Linux background, have heard about it, are probably scared at that time that Windows XP was going out of service as an end of life by Microsoft, and we're looking to a viable alternative in contrast to Windows 7, Windows 8, and then the upcoming Windows 10, and maybe even macOS, with their own set of particular problems. Privacy probably being the most important one, data security following up next. So this year we decided to run it in cooperation with the WDR. The WDR runs one of the most famous kids programs in Germany called The Show with the Mouse. The show with the mouse, you can check it out. D-Mouse, I think, Google it. WDR D-Mouse reaches about, I would reckon, I don't have firm numbers in front of me, about 70% of kids in the age bracket between 6 and 12 years of age. They run something called the Door Opener Day on a fixed date. That happens to be the 3rd of October for the last 6 years. Or maybe even 7, actually. The idea behind this is that institutions, like companies, associations, whatever you name it, open their doors, which are normally closed to the public, especially for these kids coming along on that present day. So for the first time in history, for the LUG in Frankfurt, we decided to open our doors for this particular format. So last Monday, we gathered around 8 o'clock to set the venue up. We had about 25 kids coming in at 10 o'clock, and then we had a 6-hour program or format, if you will, of exercises, workshops, tutorials, especially for kids on Linux, starting with the overall idea of open source software and what that means, right up to how do I do my first presentation with LibreOffice Impress, and how do I do my first steps in programming using Scratch. We gathered feedback, we handed out feedback sheets, and the prevailing opinion was we want to come back next year.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, I think this is really important, as I mentioned in the beginning, because at least in my experience, now it may be different in Germany, I don't know, but at least in my experience, there's always been Linux users groups, or not always, but there are Linux users groups. There are Linux conferences, but the type of people that you get at those, number one, they aren't children, first of all. Second of all, they tend to be people that have used Linux before. They're not newbies, if you will. I'm not trying to denigrate anyone, but they're not people that are new to Linux. And so I still think that there's a barrier for people getting started with Linux, or to even know about Linux, or to know that there's an alternative. Are you finding that to be true through your program?
Absolutely. When we first introduced Linux to the kids, well, an operating system is an operating system. What's the big deal? What's the difference? But slowly, there was one key moment when we first basically positioned Linux at the beginning of that day. Two of them, at the age, I think they were 10 to 11, already had their own YouTube channel. So what they didn't know, of course, is that the majority of the Google ecosystem runs on Linux. Something that they found quite particularly interesting that they were actually using Linux in the background when they were uploading videos to their YouTube channel. Also, the majority of the kids had already previous exposure to something called Android. What they didn't know, of course, is that beneath all that layer, all these layers of proprietary software, as issued by Google, a true Linux system runs at the very heart of it, i.e. the kernel. These were two eye-opener moments for them, how prevailing Linux in the real world really is.